Mr. Chambers, before we begin, there are some things in your wife's will that may come as a surprise to you. The lawyer, a man named Patterson with gray hair and kind eyes, said those words to me 3 days after I buried my wife of 42 years. I was sitting in his office, surrounded by dark with paneling and leather-bound books, wearing the same black suit I had worn to the funeral, because I had not had the energy to change into anything else. My 2 children, Robert and Christine, sat on either side of me, their faces still raw from grief, their hands occasionally reaching over to squeeze mine. I thought I knew what was coming. Margaret had always been private about money, had always insisted on handling our finances herself, and I assumed the surprise would be something like a larger savings account than I expected, or perhaps a small investment I had not known about. Margaret was practical that way. She liked to have cushions, safety nets, plans for emergencies that might never come. I was not prepared for what Patterson actually said. Your wife owned a property in Kennebunkport, Maine, a beach house, purchased in 1987. The current assessed value is approximately $1.2 million. I stared at him. The words did not make sense. Margaret and I had been married since 1982. We had shared a home, a bed, a life for over 4 decades. I knew every credit card statement, every tax return, every major purchase we had ever made. There was no beach house. There could not be a beach house. I am sorry, I said slowly. There must be some mistake. My wife did not own any property in Maine. We have never even been to Maine. Patterson looked uncomfortable. He shuffled the papers in front of him, adjusted his glasses, and continued in a voice that was carefully neutral. The property is held in a trust, Mr. Chambers. A trust that was established before your marriage. The deed is in your wife's maiden name, Margaret Ellen Ashworth. That is not possible. My voice was rising now, something between confusion and the first stirrings of anger. I would have known. After 42 years, I would have known. Dad. Christine put her hand on my arm. Let him finish. Patterson nodded gratefully and continued. There is also a bank account, separate from your joint accounts, held at a bank in Portland, Maine. The current balance is approximately $800,000. This account has been active since 1979, 3 years before your marriage. $800,000. A beach house worth over $1 million. My wife, the woman who clipped coupons and complained about the price of groceries, had been sitting on nearly $2 million in assets that I knew nothing about. How? I managed to ask. How is this possible? Patterson took a deep breath. This was clearly the part he had been dreading. Mr. Chambers, your wife's will also names a beneficiary that you may not be familiar with, a man named Daniel Ashworth, currently residing in Boston. According to the documents I have, Daniel is your wife's biological son, born on March 15, 1979, and placed for adoption shortly after birth. The room went silent. I could hear the tick of the grandfather clock in the corner, the distant sound of traffic from the street below, the ragged breathing of my children as they processed what they had just heard. Margaret had a son born before we met, a son she had never told me about in 42 years of marriage. That is insane. Robert's voice cut through the silence. He was standing now, his face flushed with anger. Our mother did not have another child. This is some kind of scam. Someone is trying to steal our inheritance. I assure you, Mr. Chambers, these documents are authentic. Patterson's voice remained calm, professional. I have verified them personally. Your mother established this trust, and these accounts specifically for Daniel. She has been in contact with him for the past 15 years, since he sought her out through an adoption reunion registry. 15 years? Christine's voice was barely a whisper. Mom knew about this for 15 years and never said anything. According to the instructions she left with me, she intended to tell all of you eventually. She was waiting for the right time. Unfortunately, the right time never came. I sat in that leather chair, in that wood-paneled office, and I felt the entire foundation of my life crumbling beneath me. Everything I thought I knew about my wife, about my marriage, about the woman I had loved and trusted and shared my life with, all of it was built on lies. Lies that had lasted longer than most people's careers. Lies that had spanned decades, holidays, anniversaries, the births of our children, the deaths of our parents. Lies that had been maintained with a discipline and dedication that I could not begin to comprehend. My name is Wesley Chambers. I am 66 years old. I spent 40 years working as an accountant for a manufacturing company, crunching numbers, balancing books, finding discrepancies that others missed. I prided myself on my attention to detail, my ability to see patterns and inconsistencies, my talent for uncovering the truth hidden in columns of figures. I started at Hartwell Manufacturing straight out of college, a nervous young man in an ill-fitting suit, convinced that everyone around me knew more than I did. The company made industrial equipment, valves and pumps and machinery that kept factories running across the country. It was not glamorous work, but it was steady, and it paid well enough to build a life on. I spent my first 5 years in a cubicle on the third floor, processing invoices and reconciling accounts, learning the rhythms of corporate finance. I was good at it, better than good. I had a mind that naturally gravitated toward order, toward balance, toward the satisfying click of numbers falling into place. Where others saw tedium, I saw puzzles waiting to be solved. By 30, I was a senior accountant. By 40, I was the head of the department. By 50, I was the chief financial officer, reporting directly to the CEO, responsible for every dollar that flowed in and out of the company. I had a corner office with a view of the city, a secretary who brought me coffee every morning, and a reputation for integrity that was worth more than any salary. I caught embezzlers. I uncovered fraud. I found the hidden accounts and the phantom vendors and the creative bookkeeping that people thought they could slip past me. Nothing escaped my attention. Nothing fooled me. I was Wesley Chambers, the man who saw everything, the accountant who could not be deceived, except at home. At home, I was blind. And for 42 years, I had missed the biggest discrepancy of all. My wife had a secret life, a secret fortune, a secret child, and I had never suspected a thing. Looking back, I wonder how I missed it. I wonder what signs I ignored, what questions I failed to ask, what moments of doubt I pushed aside because the alternative was too painful to consider. I was an accountant. I was trained to find anomalies. How did I miss the biggest anomaly in my life? The answer, I think, is love. Love made me blind. Love made me trust when I should have questioned. Love made me believe the story Margaret told me because I wanted to believe it. Because the alternative was unthinkable. Because doubting her would have meant doubting everything we had built together. To understand how completely Margaret's revelation destroyed me, you need to understand who she was to me, who I thought she was. The woman I fell in love with, the woman I married, the woman I believe I knew better than I knew myself. I met Margaret in the spring of 1981. I was 23 years old, fresh out of college with an accounting degree, working my first real job at a firm in the city. She was 25, working as a secretary at a law office in the same building. We met in the elevator, both of us running late on a rainy Monday morning. Both of us trying to balance coffee cups and umbrellas and briefcases. She laughed when I dropped my umbrella. Not at me, but with me, in a way that made me feel like we were sharing a joke instead of witnessing my clumsiness. She had the most beautiful laugh I had ever heard, warm and genuine. The kind of laugh that made you want to say something funny just to hear it again. Monday mornings, right? She said, bending down to help me pick up the umbrella. Her hand brushed against mine, and I felt something electric pass between us, something I had never felt before and would never feel again with anyone else. I am usually more coordinated than this, I said, my face burning with embarrassment. I promise, I do not go around dropping things on strangers all the time. That is too bad. She smiled, and I noticed her eyes for the first time, green, with flecks of gold around the pupils. Dropping things on strangers is an excellent way to meet people. Very efficient. I laughed, despite my embarrassment. I will keep that in mind. Wesley Chambers, professional umbrella dropper, at your service. Margaret Ashworth, professional stranger who gets things dropped on her. The elevator doors opened, and we both hesitated. Neither of us wanted to end the conversation. She was going to the 14th floor. I was going to the 8th. We had about 30 seconds before our paths would diverge, possibly forever. Would you like to have coffee sometime? The words came out before I could stop them, before I could calculate the odds of rejection, before I could talk myself out of taking the risk. To make up for nearly impaling you with an umbrella, I mean. She smiled again, that warm, genuine smile that made my heart do things hearts are not supposed to do. I would like that very much. There's a cafe on the corner. I usually take my break around 3. We had coffee that afternoon. We had dinner that Friday. By the end of the month, I knew I was going to marry her. Those first few months were the happiest of my life. Everything was new and exciting and full of possibility. We would meet for lunch in the park near our building, sharing sandwiches and stories, learning each other's histories and hopes and dreams. We would go to movies on Saturday nights and hold hands in the darkness, neither of us paying attention to the screen because we were too busy sneaking glances at each other. We would walk through the city for hours, talking about everything and nothing, building the foundation of what I believe would be a lifetime together. Margaret was everything I had ever wanted. She was smart and funny and kind. She was practical in ways that balanced my tendency toward dreaming. She was beautiful, with dark hair and green eyes that seemed to see right through me, that seemed to understand parts of myself that I could not articulate. But there was also a sadness in her, a depth of feeling that she kept carefully hidden. Sometimes, in quiet moments, I would catch her staring out the window with an expression I could not read. Sometimes she would go silent in the middle of a conversation, lost in thoughts she never shared. Sometimes, late at night, I would hear her crying softly in the bathroom, and when I asked what was wrong, she would say it was nothing, just a bad dream, just memories she was trying to forget. I did not push. I told myself that everyone had secrets, that everyone carried pain they did not want to share. I told myself that she would open up to me when she was ready, that my job was to be patient and supportive and trustworthy. I told myself that love meant accepting someone completely, including the parts of them you did not understand. I was right about some of that, and I was wrong about everything else. She told me about her past on our 5th date, or at least, she told me what I thought was her past. She said she had grown up in a small town in Vermont, the only child of parents who had died in a car accident when she was 19. She said she had worked her way through secretarial school, had moved to the city to start fresh, had been on her own ever since. Her voice trembled as she told the story. Her eyes filled with tears as she quickly blinked away. I reached across the table and took her hand, and she held on to me like I was the only solid thing in a world that kept shifting beneath her feet. "I do not talk about it much," she said. "It is still painful, even after all these years. But I wanted you to know. I wanted you to understand why I am the way I am, why I do not have any family, why I sometimes seem distant. You do not have to explain anything," I said. "You do not have to justify your pain. I am just glad you trusted me enough to share it." She smiled through her tears. "You are a good man, Wesley Chambers. I do not know what I did to deserve you. You dropped an umbrella on me. Apparently, that is all it takes." She laughed that beautiful laugh, and I fell even more in love with her, with the woman she was, with the woman I thought she was, with the woman she would pretend to be for the next 42 years. There were gaps in her story, I realized later. Gaps I had filled in with my own assumptions because I was young and in love and not asking the questions I should have asked. What had she done between 19 and 25? Where had she lived? Who had she been? I did not ask because I did not think it mattered. I was in love with the woman in front of me, not the girl she had been. The past was the past. What mattered was the future we were going to build together. We were married in June of 1982, a small ceremony at the courthouse followed by a reception at a restaurant that no longer exists. My parents were there, thrilled that their awkward, bookish son had found such a lovely wife. Margaret had no family to invite, or so I believed. She cried during the vows, and I thought they were tears of joy. Now, I wonder if they were tears of something else. Grief, perhaps. Guilt. The weight of secrets that she was already carrying. Secrets that would only grow heavier with each passing year. Our first apartment was a tiny one-bedroom in a neighborhood that was not quite safe, but was all we could afford. Margaret made it into a home. She hung curtains she had sewn herself, planted flowers on a fire escape, cooked elaborate dinners in a kitchen barely big enough for one person. She had a gift for creating warmth, for making any space feel lived in and loved. I worked long hours in those early years, trying to establish myself, trying to prove that I was worth the promotions I hoped would come. Margaret never complained. She understood ambition because she had it too, though hers was directed inward, toward the home and family she was building rather than the career ladder I was climbing. We talked about children from the beginning. We both wanted them, wanted to create a family that would last, wanted to fill our lives with the noise and chaos and joy that children bring. Margaret was particularly eager, almost desperate in her desire to become a mother. At the time, I thought it was just the normal longing that many women feel. Now I understand that it was something else entirely. It was a second chance. It was redemption. Robert was born in April of 1984, after 18 hours of labor that nearly broke Margaret, but ended in the most beautiful moment of our lives. I held my son for the first time in a hospital room that smelled of antiseptic and hope, and I wept with the joy I had not known was possible. Margaret was a different person after Robert was born, not in a bad way, but in a way that puzzled me at first. She was more present, more focused, more determined to be the perfect mother. She read every parenting book she could find. She took Robert to every doctor's appointment, every vaccination, every checkup. She documented his life in photo albums that grew thicker by the month, capturing every milestone, every first step, every toothless smile. I thought she was just being thorough. I thought she was just being a good mother. I did not understand that she was making up for lost time, that every moment with Robert was a moment she had not had with Daniel, that every photograph was proof that she could be the mother she had not been able to be before. Christine came along 2 years later, in the summer of 1986, where Robert was calm and quiet. Christine was fierce and demanding, a force of nature from the moment she was born. Margaret adored her with the same intensity she had shown with Robert, pouring herself into motherhood with a devotion that sometimes worried me. "You need to take care of yourself, too," I would tell her. "You need to have something outside of the children, some identity beyond being their mother." She would smile and nod and agree, and then she would go right back to focusing every ounce of her energy on Robert and Christine, on being the mother she had always wanted to be, on never, ever letting another child down. We moved to the suburbs when Christine was 3, a modest house in a good school district, with a backyard and a swing set and room to grow. Margaret threw herself into homemaking with the same dedication she had brought to parenting. She joined the PTA, organized neighborhood cookouts, volunteered at the church, created a social world that revolved around our family and our community. Those were good years, the best years of my life, or so I believed. I was advancing at work, earning promotions and raises that allowed us to live comfortably. The children were thriving in school, making friends, finding their own paths. Margaret and I had settled into the easy rhythms of a long marriage, the comfortable silence of two people who know each other so well that words are not always necessary. We celebrated anniversaries and birthdays and holidays. We took vacations to the beach and the mountains, and once, to Europe, a trip we had saved for years to afford. We watched our children grow from babies to toddlers to teenagers to adults. We weathered the storms that every marriage faces, the disagreements and disappointments and moments of doubt, and we came through them stronger. I thought I knew everything about my wife. I thought there were no secrets left between us. I thought that 40 years of marriage had stripped away all the mysteries, had revealed us to each other completely and honestly. I was a fool, a trusting, loving, willfully blind fool. But I was a happy fool. And maybe that counts for something. Maybe the years of happiness were real, even if the foundation they were built on was a lie. Maybe love can be genuine even when it is not based on complete truth. Maybe I was right to trust Margaret, right to love her, right to believe in the life we had built together. Or maybe I was just telling myself that because the alternative was too painful to accept. The children grew up and left home. Robert became a lawyer, moved to Chicago, married a woman named Jennifer who fit into our family as if she had always been part of it. Christine became a teacher, stayed close at home, remained single by choice, focused on a career she loved. Margaret and I became empty nesters, rattling around a house that suddenly felt too big, learning to be a couple again after decades of being parents. Those years were good too, in a different way. We traveled more. We rekindled the romance that had dimmed slightly during the busy years of child-rearing. We rediscovered each other, fell in love again with the people we had become. I thought we were entering the final chapter of our lives together, a chapter of peace and contentment and well-earned rest. I did not know that Margaret was carrying a secret that would rewrite every previous chapter. I did not know that the woman I loved was living a double life, maintaining connections and accounts and relationships that I knew nothing about. I did not know that when she said she was visiting old friends or attending conferences, she was really going to Maine, to the house where she had given up her son, to meet with a child she had never told me about. 15 years. For 15 years, she had been in contact with Daniel. For 15 years, she had been rebuilding a relationship that I did not know existed. For 15 years, she had lied to me about where she was going and what she was doing and who she was spending time with, and I never suspected a thing. Our marriage was happy. I need to say that clearly, because everything that came after might make it seem otherwise. We were genuinely happy for 42 years. We raised 2 wonderful children. We built a comfortable life. We traveled together, laughed together, faced the challenges that every married couple faces, and came through them stronger. Margaret was a devoted mother. When Robert was born in 1984, she left her job to stay home with him. When Christine came along 2 years later, she threw herself into motherhood with a passion that sometimes worried me. She was almost too devoted, too present, too determined to give our children everything they could possibly need. Now I understand why. She had given up a child once. She was not going to make that mistake again. Every moment she spent with Robert and Christine was, in some way, an act of penance, an attempt to be for them the mother she had not been able to be for Daniel. But at the time, I saw only love. I saw a woman who adored her children, who put their needs before her own, who created a home that was warm and welcoming and full of joy. I saw my wife, my partner, the person I trusted more than anyone else in the world. I never saw the secret she was carrying. I never saw the hidden accounts, the property in Maine, the life she had lived before she met me. I never saw the pain she must have felt every time she looked at our children and thought about the child she had given away. I was blind, and I do not know if I can ever forgive myself for that blindness. The diagnosis came in January, 2 years before she died. Pancreatic cancer, stage 3. The doctor used words like aggressive and challenging and limited options, but I could see in his eyes what he was really saying. I could see the death sentence he was too kind to pronounce directly. Margaret took the news better than I did. She nodded calmly, asked practical questions about treatment timelines and side effects, thanked the doctor for his honesty. It was not until we were in the car, driving home through a gray winter afternoon, that she finally broke down. "I am not ready," she said, tears streaming down her face. "There is so much I have not done. So much I have not said. I thought I had more time." I pulled the car over the side of the road and held her while she cried. I told her we would fight this together. I told her that statistics were just numbers, that miracles happened every day, that she was the strongest person I knew and she would beat this. I believed what I was saying. I had to believe it. The alternative was unthinkable. The next 18 months were a battle. Chemotherapy that left her weak and nauseous and barely able to get out of bed. Radiation that burned her skin and sapped her energy. Experimental treatments that offered hope and delivered disappointment. We tried everything. We fought with every weapon available to us. And for a while, it seemed like we were winning. The tumor shrank. Her energy returned. She started talking about the future again, about trips we would take, when she was better, about grandchildren she wanted to see grow up. I let myself believe that we had beaten the odds, that our love was strong enough to defeat even cancer. I was wrong. The cancer came back in the fall, more aggressive than before, spreading to her liver and her lungs in places the doctors did not even want to name. This time, there was no hope to cling to. This time, we knew how the story would end. Margaret spent her last months at home, surrounded by the family she loved. Robert flew in from Chicago every other week. Christine moved back into her old room to help with care. I took early retirement from the company because there was nothing more important than being with my wife in her final days. She was brave until the end. Even as the pain grew worse, even as her body failed her, she maintained her dignity and her grace. She told stories about our life together, laughing at memories that made me cry. She gave advice to Robert and Christine, wisdom she wanted them to carry forward after she was gone. She held my hand every night and told me she loved me, that she had always loved me, that I was the best thing that had ever happened to her. I believed her. I still believe her. Even knowing what I know now, I believe that her love for me was real. She died on a Tuesday morning in March, with me holding her hand, with her children standing beside her bed, with sunlight streaming through the windows she had picked out 20 years earlier because she liked how the light came through them in the morning. Her last words were, "Forgive me, Wesley. Please forgive me." I thought she was talking about leaving me. I thought she was apologizing for dying, for breaking the promise we had made to grow old together, for leaving me alone in a house full of memories. I did not understand. Not until 3 days later, sitting in that lawyer's office, learning that forgiveness was not about death at all. The days after the reading of the will were chaos. Robert was furious, convinced that Daniel was a con artist who had manipulated our mother. Christine was heartbroken, devastated by the realization that the woman she had idolized had been lying to her for her entire life. And I was lost, wandering through our house like a ghost, touching Margaret's things and wondering who she really was. The anger came first, a rage so intense it frightened me. I threw things. I broke things. I screamed at the walls of the house Margaret and I had built together, demanding answers from a woman who was no longer there to give them. 42 years. 42 years of marriage, of trust, of what I believed was complete honesty, all of it built on a lie. Then came the grief. Not just grief for Margaret, but grief for the marriage I had thought we had, grief for the trust that had been shattered, grief for the version of my wife that had never really existed, the woman without secrets, the woman who shared everything with me. I mourned her twice, once for her death, and once for the illusion that died with her. Then came the questions, the endless, torturous questions that kept me awake at night and haunted me during the day. Why had she not told me? Did she not trust me? Did she think I would leave her? Did she think I was the kind of man who would reject a woman for something that happened before we met? What did it say about our marriage that she had been able to hide something this enormous for over 4 decades? I found the letters on the 3rd day. They were hidden in a box at the back of her closet, behind old sweaters and forgotten handbags, in a place I would never have thought to look. Dozens of letters, spanning 15 years, all written in a handwriting I did not recognize. Daniel's letters. I should not have read them. They were not meant for me, but I could not stop myself. I needed to understand. I needed to know who this person was, this stranger who had been part of my wife's life for 15 years, this secret son who was about to inherit half of everything she had. The first letter was dated October 12, 2009. It was tentative, careful, the words of a man who was not sure if he was welcome. Dear Mrs. Ashworth, or Margaret, if I may call you that, my name is Daniel Ashworth. I was born on March 15, 1979, at Portland General Hospital in Portland, Maine. I was adopted shortly after birth by Michael and Susan Ashworth, who raised me in Boston. They were wonderful parents, and I want you to know that I had a good life. I found your information through an adoption reunion registry. I understand if you do not want to hear from me. I understand if this letter brings up painful memories. But I have spent my whole life wondering about you, about why you gave me up, about who I might have become if things had been different. If you are willing to talk, even just once, I would be grateful. If not, I will respect your wishes and never contact you again. Whatever you decide, I want you to know that I do not blame you. I do not know what circumstances led to my adoption, but I know that it must have been difficult. I hope you have found happiness in your life. I hope you have found peace. With respect and hope, Daniel. Margaret had written back. Of course she had. How could she not? The letter from Daniel was so gentle, so understanding, so free of blame or anger. It would have broken her heart to ignore it. I found her response, a draft she had kept, written in her careful handwriting on the back of one of Daniel's letters. Dear Daniel, I have read your letters so many times that the paper is starting to wear thin. I do not know how to tell you what I am feeling. Relief, gratitude, terror, joy, all of these things at once, all of them fighting for space in my heart. I was 19 when I had you. I was alone, scared, with no money and no family to support me. I made the decision to give you up because I believed it was the best thing for you, the only way to give you a chance at a life I could not provide. It was the hardest thing I have ever done. It has been the hardest thing for 40 years. I have thought about you every single day since the moment they took you from my arms. I have wondered where you were, what you were doing, whether you were happy. I have dreamed about you, prayed for you, hoped that you were living the life you deserved. I am married now, Daniel. I have been married for almost 30 years. I have 2 children, your half-brother and half-sister, who do not know you exist. My husband does not know. I have kept you a secret for so long that the thought of revealing the truth terrifies me more than I can express. But I want to know you. Despite the fear, despite the complications, I want to know who you have become. I want to hear about your life, your hopes, your dreams. I want to be part of your story, even if it is only in secret, even if it is only through these letters. Please write back. Please tell me everything. I have waited 40 years for this moment, and I am not going to let fear steal it from me. With all the love I could not give you then, Margaret. I read every letter in that box. It took me 3 days, stopping only to eat and sleep, reading until my eyes burned and my heart ached so badly I thought it might stop beating altogether. Through those letters, I learned the truth about my wife. The truth she had never been able to tell me. Margaret had gotten pregnant at 18, the result of a brief relationship with a college student she had met at a party. The boy, whose name she never mentioned in the letters, had disappeared when he learned about the pregnancy. Her parents, strict Catholics who could not accept an unwed mother in the family, had kicked her out of the house. She had spent the pregnancy alone, living in a home for unwed mothers in Portland, Maine. She had given birth in a charity ward, held her son for 6 hours, and then signed the papers that would give him to strangers. The house in Maine was not really a house. It was the place where Daniel had been born. Margaret had bought it in 1987, 5 years after we were married, using money she had inherited from an aunt I had never heard of. She had told me the inheritance was small, just a few $1,000s, and I had believed her because I had no reason not to. She had been returning to that house every year. I realized as I read the letters. Business trips, she had called them, visits to see old friends, conferences for a professional organization she belonged to, all lies. She had been going to Maine to sit in the house where she had given up her son, to remember him, to grieve for the life they might have had. When Daniel found her, everything changed. She finally had the chance to know her son, to hear about his life, to be part of his story in some small way. She could not tell me or the children, she wrote. She could not risk losing us. But she could love Daniel in secret, through letters and occasional phone calls, and, eventually, through visits that I thought were something else entirely. The money in the bank account was for Daniel. She had been saving for him since before I met her, setting aside whatever she could spare from her secretarial salary, then from her share of our household expenses, then from the small inheritance she had claimed was much smaller than it actually was. She had been building a fortune for the son she had given away, a fortune that would make up for all the years she had not been able to give him anything at all. I put down the last letter and sat in the silence of our bedroom, surrounded by my wife's things, breathing in the faint scent of her perfume that still lingered on her pillow. I thought about all the years we had spent together, all the conversations we had had, all the moments of intimacy, of trust, of what I had believed was complete honesty. And I realized that I had never known her at all. The meeting with Daniel happened 2 weeks after the reading of the will. He had reached out through Patterson, asking if we would be willing to meet, saying he understood if we needed time, if we were angry, if we wanted nothing to do with him. I said yes before Robert and Christine could object. I needed to see him. I needed to look into the face of my wife's secret and understand what I have been living with for all these years. We met at a coffee shop in Boston, neutral territory, a place where none of us had any memories or associations. Daniel was already there when I arrived, sitting at a corner table with a cup of coffee. He was not drinking. He stood when he saw me, and I felt my breath catch in my throat. He looked like Margaret. Not exactly, but enough. The same green eyes, the same shape of the face, the same way of holding himself that spoke of quiet dignity and carefully controlled emotion. He was 45 years old, a professor of literature at a small college, married with 2 children of his own. He was, by any measure, a successful and decent man. "Mr. Chambers," he said, extending his hand, "thank you for meeting with me. I know this must be incredibly difficult." I shook his hand. It was warm, his grip firm but not aggressive. "Call me Wesley. And yes, it is difficult, but I think it is necessary." We sat down across from each other, 2 strangers connected by a woman who was no longer there to explain. Robert and Christine arrived a few minutes later, their faces tight with suspicion and grief. They sat on either side of me, a protective formation that was not lost on Daniel. "I want to start by saying how sorry I am," Daniel began. "I know my existence must feel like a betrayal. I know you are all hurting, and I have made that hurt worse just by being here. If I could change that, I would. You could start by explaining why you kept in contact with our mother for 15 years without any of us knowing." Robert's voice was cold, accusatory. "You had opportunities to tell the truth. You chose not to." Daniel nodded slowly. "You are right. I did have opportunities, and I chose to respect your mother's wishes. She was terrified of losing you. She believed, rightly or wrongly, that you would reject her if you knew the truth. She asked me to keep our relationship secret, and I agreed because I did not want to cause her more pain than she had already suffered. She lied to us for 40 years. Christine's voice cracked. "How are we supposed to trust anything she ever said?" "I cannot answer that. I cannot tell you how to feel or what to believe. All I can tell you is what I know." Daniel's eyes moved to me. "She loved you. All of you. Every letter she wrote to me was filled with stories about her family, about how proud she was of her children, about how much she loved her husband. She called you her redemption, Wesley. She said marrying you was the best decision she ever made. Then why did she lie?" The question came out of me before I could stop it, raw and broken. If she loved me so much, why did she keep this from me for 42 years? Daniel was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was gentle. "Because she was ashamed, not of me, I do not think, but of what she had done. She was 19 years old, alone, scared. She gave up her baby because she had no other choice. And she spent the rest of her life trying to make up for that decision, trying to be the perfect wife and mother, trying to prove that she was worthy of the family she had built. She could have told me. I would have understood. Would you? If she had told you on your first date that she had a secret child, would you have married her? If she had told you on your wedding night, would you have stayed? She could not take that risk. She loved you too much to lose you. I wanted to argue. I wanted to say that of course I would have understood, that of course I would have accepted her past, that our love was strong enough to survive any revelation. But I was not sure it was true. I did not know who I had been at 23, what prejudices I might have held, what judgments I might have made. Maybe Margaret was right to hide the truth. Maybe her lies were an act of love, a sacrifice she made to protect the family she had built. Or maybe she was just afraid. Maybe the lies had started as self-preservation and grown into something she could not escape, a web of deception that became more tangled with each passing year until there was no way out except death. The meeting lasted 2 hours. Daniel told us about his life, his family, his career. He showed us pictures of his children, Margaret's grandchildren, 2 boys who had her smile. He answered every question we asked, patiently, honestly, with a grace that I could not help but admire. By the end, Christine was crying openly, grieving not just for her mother, but for the brother she had never known, the family that had been hidden from her. Robert was still angry, but his anger had softened into something more like confusion, the realization that the world was more complicated than he had thought. And I sat there, looking at the face of my wife's secret, and I felt something I had not expected to feel. Gratitude. Gratitude that Margaret had found Daniel. Gratitude that she had been able to know her son, even if only in secret. Gratitude that she had not died with that burden unshared, that there was someone in the world who had given her absolution before she left it. She talked about you constantly in her letters. Daniel said to me as we were leaving, she said you were the kindest man she had ever known. She said you made her feel safe in a world that had always frightened her. She said she did not deserve you, but she was grateful every day that you had chosen her. I nodded, unable to speak. The tears I had been holding back for 3 days finally broke free, streaming down my face in the middle of Boston coffee shop, surrounded by strangers who had no idea that my entire world had just been rebuilt on a new foundation. The months that followed were a process of reconstruction, not of my marriage, which was over in the most final way possible, but of my understanding of who Margaret had been and what our life together had meant. I visited the house in Maine. I stood on the porch of the beach house where my wife had given birth to her first child, looking out at the ocean, trying to imagine what she had felt in those dark days. The house was beautiful, carefully maintained, full of furniture and photographs and memories that I had never been part of. There were pictures of Daniel on the walls, pictures of his children, pictures of a life that had existed parallel to mine, without my knowledge. I found a letter she had written but never sent, tucked into a book on the bedside table. It was addressed to me, "My dearest Wesley, I am writing this letter knowing that you may never read it, knowing that I may never find the courage to give it to you. But I need to say these things, even if only to paper, even if only to myself. I have lied to you. I have lied to you for our entire marriage, and I am sorrier for that than I can ever express. I kept Daniel a secret because I was afraid, because I was ashamed, because I did not know how to be both the woman you married and the woman who gave up her child. I thought if I could keep those two lives separate, I could survive in both of them. I was wrong. The secret has been a weight on my heart for 40 years. It has made every joy slightly less joyful, every triumph slightly hollow. I have lived in fear of discovery, fear of judgment, fear of losing everything I have worked so hard to build. But I want you to know, Wesley, that my love for you is never a lie. I loved you from the first moment I saw you, dropping your umbrella in that elevator, laughing at yourself with an openness that took my breath away. I have loved you every day since. You gave me a life I never thought I would have. You gave me children, a home, a family. You gave me redemption. I should have told you the truth. I know that now. I should have trusted you, trusted our love, trusted that you would understand. But I was too afraid, and now it is too late. The cancer has spread, and the doctors say I have months, not years. I do not have time to undo 40 years of lies. I do not have time to explain, to apologize, to earn the forgiveness I do not deserve. All I can do is love you. All I can do is spend whatever time I have left being the wife you always thought I was, the woman I always wished I could be. And when I am gone, when the truth finally comes out, I hope you will remember that everything I did, even the lies, was because I loved you too much to lose you. Forgive me, Wesley, if you can. Forgive me. Yours, always and forever, Margaret. I folded the letter and put it in my pocket. I walked down to the beach and stood at the edge of the water, letting the cold waves wash over my feet. I thought about Margaret, about the life she had lived, about the secret she had kept, about the love that had been real even when everything else was a lie. And I forgave her. Not immediately, not easily, not without anger and grief and a profound sense of betrayal. But eventually, slowly, painfully, I forgave her because she was my wife, because I loved her, because 42 years of happiness could not be erased by 42 years of lies, because the woman I mourned was still the woman I had married, flawed and frightened and doing the best she could with a hand she had been dealt. I forgave her because that is what love is, not the absence of mistakes, but the willingness to see past them, not the perfection of another person, but the acceptance of their imperfections, not the demand for truth, but the recognition that everyone carries secrets, everyone hides pain, everyone is fighting battles that the people around them cannot see. Daniel is part of our family now. It took time and it took work, but Robert and Christine eventually accepted him as their brother. We have dinners together, holidays, the normal rituals of family life. His children call me Grandpa Wesley, and I love them as if they had been mine from the beginning. The money in the house went to Daniel, as Margaret intended. Robert and Christine inherited the rest, which was more than enough for anyone. There were no lawsuits, no battles, no fights over who deserved what. We divided the estate the way Margaret wanted, and we moved on. I visit her grave every Sunday. I bring flowers, usually roses, because they were her favorite. I tell her about my week, about the grandchildren, about the small joys and sorrows that make up an ordinary life. I tell her I miss her. I tell her I forgive her. I tell her I will love her until the day I die, and probably long after that. I do not know if she can hear me. I do not know if there is anything after this life, any place where the dead can watch over the living and know that they are remembered. But I talk to her anyway, because it helps me, because it keeps her memory alive, because after 42 years of marriage, I do not know how to live without sharing my life with her. The lies do not matter anymore. The secrets do not matter. What matters is that we loved each other truly and deeply for over 4 decades. What matters is that we built a family, raised children, created a life together. What matters is that when she died, she was holding my hand, looking into my eyes, telling me that she loved me. Everything else is just details. I am 66 years old. I have been a widower for 9 months. I have learned things about my wife that I never suspected, things that shook me to my core and forced me to reconsider everything I thought I knew about love and trust and marriage. And I would do it all again. Every moment, every year, every lie and every truth. I would marry her again in a heartbeat, knowing everything I know now, because she was Margaret, because she was my wife. Because some loves are strong enough to survive anything, even secrets, even death, even the devastating truth that the person you love was never quite who you thought they were. The cameras do not lie. The letters do not lie. The will does not lie. But love is bigger than truth. Love is stronger than facts. Love is the thing that remains when everything else has been stripped away. I learned that from Margaret. I learned it too late, but I learned it. And I will carry that lesson with me until the day I join her, wherever she is, and we can finally have a conversation we should have had 42 years ago. Thanks for listening. It took me a lifetime to learn that respect is not given. It is earned, and sometimes you have to fight for it. I have left 2 more stories on your screen for men who learned the same lesson. Click the one that speaks to you. And if you believe family is about loyalty, not just blood, tap the bell. Remember, it is never too late to stand up for yourself.